In this video we're going to have a look at stripping the gearbox. Now there's a couple of reasons I want to do it. The first is I want to make sure there is nothing wrong with this gearbox or any of the bearings. And the second reason I want to do it is I want to clean up everything. And when I mean clean, I mean like this. So I've had these blasted and that is what they have come out like. I've used a wet media blaster, seems to go by several different names. Vapor blaster, slurry blaster. It basically uses glass bead in a water with compressed air as well. So it's really quite amazing what finish you can get. Anyway, compared with the gearbox and that differential casing, it really is quite disgusting. So I want to clean it all up. Now I'm going to follow the Haynes manual, nothing fancy. First thing it tells me to do is get rid of all this differential and output shafts. So that's what I'm going to do, and then we'll carry on from there. So I'm at the stage where I can remove the diff, but before I do I'm just going to point out this side. So as I've removed this casing, this half here, that hole down the bottom, please focus, thank you, actually has these items in. So you want to pull those out. That's part of the selector mechanism. So pull those out of that hole, remove all the remaining bolts, and then we should be able to pull that off. Right, I have removed the differential. That came off without any problems. There's just another thing I want to point out. On this side there are actually shims, so you really want to be keeping those in the correct place. And in fact they're only on that side, there's no shims on this side. So make sure you keep them in the right place and put this out of the way, keep it nice and clean. So I've now removed the speedo drive cover and the engine mount. That's the engine mount there. Obviously I've taken the speedo drive gear there, and now this housing has come off. That was quite difficult to remove, it was well stuck with the gasket, and as you can see at the top there, there is a dowel, and there's also one at the bottom. So instead of prising it off with a screwdriver and potentially damaging the surfaces, what I've done is I've approached it from the inside and just used a drift to push it off or hammer it off from the inside. So that is all I'm going to do today. I will come back tomorrow. Okay, so it's another day. Let's get on. So the first thing it told me to do is undo these two bolts there and the two bolts on the front there. Then it says in the manual that you can actually pull out the suction pipe from the strainer, which you can indeed do. Just wiggle it a bit and that will come out. The strainer itself is still at the bottom there and you cannot take it out at the moment. So I've had a quick read. What we're going to do next is just take the circlip out and remove that roller bearing. Okay, so I've experienced the first problem. Getting this bearing off that shaft was quite hard. And what I did to overcome that was I used a ball joint splitter, and I've actually thinned that down so it fitted behind the bearing, and then I managed to pull it off the shaft. Please focus, camera. Thank you. Yeah, first problem, but we have overcome it. So the next part, now we've got that bearing off, is to undo the nut behind it. So we're going to tap that lock washer off and undo that nut, but to undo that nut you have to engage two gears at once, and the Haynes manual suggests you engage first gear and fourth gear. And the way you do that is take your selector rod, turn that fully anti-clockwise, that will disengage it, and then manually slide this synchronizer to number 1 and this synchronizer to number 4. So that is now locked in two gears, gear number 1 and gear number 4. So the gearbox will not turn, it is locked. So now I should be able to tap that lock washer down and undo that nut. It does say it is exceptionally tight though. So the Haynes manual suggests the nut is going to be very tight, and it was. So you'll see in this picture what I have done to get that off, but it did come off without damage. You may need somebody else to help you, but I am on my own. So you see the piece of wood that I have put through the casing to stop it turning. So the next stage, according to Mr. Haynes, is to turn the gearbox around, and this time we're going to get that nut undone. So that might be a challenge. That is quite a big nut, and I'm not sure I have a socket to do that, but I'll give it a go. Okay, so I managed to get that nut undone. You need a 1.5 inch deep socket. I have to be honest, it was exceptionally tight and I needed to go and get a friend to help us. And it was so tight that firstly I snapped a bit of wood, bent the piece of tube, and I finally thought I'd cracked it, but actually managed to break the end of my extension. Anyway, did finally manage to get it off. Once you've got it off, you can then pull out the gear here. That's the output gear. So the next task, if I just relocate down to here and get the camera to focus, is to undo the 3 retaining bolts around that main bearing. So knock back the tab washers and take those out. Once you have undone that and removed it, you can then, please focus camera, there is actually a shim in here. See it there? You can take that out, and also this plate there, which has just fallen down. So remove those as well. So as explained, I am using a Haynes manual, and at this point it tells you to measure the end float on the main shaft. So the end float, there's the feeler gauge there, and you want to measure it behind that gear, so I can't see and look behind the camera. So you want to measure it down there. I'll just zoom in so you can see that. Right, focus please camera, focus. So the bit that's in the middle now, that tab there, is the frost washer. Obviously that's the gear, and you can see the feeler gauge in the gap between the two. Once you have measured that gap, you can then push out the shaft from the leg here. So push it out from the back towards the flywheel end. You should be able to pull that out. There it is. And I'm not sure if they will drop down. Okay, that is the shaft out. Let's have a look at that. It doesn't look too bad actually. I'm quite pleased with that. I think, does that mean I can now lift the leg gears out? Let's have a look. I don't know. I'll just put the camera down because I can't do it holding the camera. Okay, so the lay gears did indeed just lift up, as did the filter mesh there, and also with the lay gears you also want to make sure you get rid of or take out those 2 thrust bearings, or thrust washers I should say. The next part I've actually jumped onto was front here. So you had to take the circlip out of here, and then it says very carefully use the brass drift to knock the bearing out from inside. Once you've gone a certain distance, you'll find you can't hit the bearing anymore. So what I've done is put the big nut, that's the nut from the other end, I put that on there and then used a pry bar to push it off, and actually it did come off okay. So that's that bit done. The next bit tells me to push the shaft back in, so I'll have a read of the instructions and then work out what I'm doing. Okay, so I get it now. What it tells you to do is to hit the main shaft, and I've done that with a handle of a lump hammer, so basically something like that, and that has pushed it all back, so there's a good gap here. Now it won't go all the way out, but then once you've got that gap here, you're then meant to try and push this bearing that way. So that's the next task, get that bearing out of the way. As you can see, I have managed to drift that bearing out. It takes a little bit of care. You have to be very careful where you're hitting the bearing on the other side. I should have read the step more carefully, but in all honesty I didn't really understand what it meant. It says be careful not to lose the bits that are in here. In fact, I will read what it says while focusing on the bits in question. It says, take care that the sliding collar of the 3rd, 4th synchro hub does not become disengaged from the hub, otherwise the detent balls and springs will be released. Well, there's 2 of the springs and 2 of the balls. There's still another spring and ball in there. So it may have been better just to put a tie wrap on the shaft just to hold that all together while I was pulling this out. Anyway, lesson learned. Hopefully I haven't lost one of those. So this has gone quite well. I have had a few problems, but I've overcome them. Now that bearing is out from here, it suggests I should just be able to lift this out of the gearbox. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it holding the camera. Or can I? Yes, I can. So there you go. That is basically the bearing, sorry, the gearbox stripped out. Now the only question is, where is the missing spring and ball? So that is what it looks like inside the case now. I have managed to locate one of the springs, but I think I have lost one of the little ball bearings. You may have noticed I've taken out the reverse gears. I forgot to do that at the time. I think they could have come out when I took the lay gears out. But the next task is probably take out these selectors. Okay, hopefully the camera is picking this up. The next step is to drift out the little pin. So I've got a pin punch in there that's in the hole. I need to drift that out, and then hopefully the shaft should slide out. So yep, once you have drifted that pin out, the shaft does actually come out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in front of the gearbox and then move these and put them back in place so I don't lose the position they are in. The next stage is to undo that nut on the bell crank levers, I think they're called. It says that you need to keep these in their order, so I'm going to very carefully remember where they were, or put them on a tie wrap so I don't lose their position. So there's the bell crank levers that I've removed, and as you can see I've put them on a tie wrap just to keep them in the right order. So the last bit of this strip down is just to push the selector mechanism into the gearbox and withdraw it. So there you go, that is the last bit, and unfortunately I cannot see the missing ball bearing, so I'm going to have to find one of those. Anyway, so that is it for this video. That is the gearbox stripped down. I will leave the rebuild for another video. So I hope you've enjoyed that one. I hope it's been of help to you, and thank you for watching.